The rain came down like a punishment, cold and relentless, slicing through the night in waves. The barn, barely standing, creaked under the pressure of the storm. Its roof was patched with old tin sheets that clanged with each drop. Holes in the walls let the wind curl inside like fingers trying to snatch the warmth away. There was no insulation, no electricity, just shadows and the occasional flash of lightning that lit up the crumbling beams overhead. Maria crouched in the corner, her arms around her 3 children. They were huddled on a pile of hay that was dry when they found it, now damp and sour-smelling. Her oldest, Ellie, tried to stay brave for the little ones, even as her lips turned blue. Joey, just 5, was curled into Maria's side, his thumb in his mouth, body trembling. The baby, Ava, whimpered now and then but had finally drifted into an exhausted sleep against Maria's chest. The thin blanket Maria had pulled from a donation bin 2 towns over was soaked through. She had wrapped it around the children, letting her own back take the cold. Her hair was wet, clinging to her neck. Her jeans stuck to her legs. Her shoes were ruined, the soles flapping. The food she had stashed in a crumpled paper bag was gone. 2 packs of crackers and 1 apple had to stretch over 3 days. A hole in the roof let the rain pour onto the dirt floor in a steady stream, forming a puddle just inches from their bedding. Every few minutes, Maria checked to make sure her children hadn't shifted into the wet. She whispered softly to them, not to soothe them, they were mostly asleep now, but to soothe herself. Just one more night, babies, she murmured, stroking Joey's tangled hair. Mama's trying, I promise. Outside, the road was empty. No headlights, no footsteps, no help. She had gone to the shelter 3 days ago. They said they were full. Said they could put her on a waiting list. But kids needed more than promises. So she found this, an abandoned barn off a side road that no one bothered with anymore. Broken, forgotten, like she was. Thunder rolled again. She didn't flinch anymore. There was no space left inside her for fear. Just determination. She pressed a kiss to Ava's forehead, then laid her cheek against Ellie's shoulder. Her body ached from holding everything together. And still, she prayed. Not for a miracle, not even for kindness. Just a door. One dry place to rest. Morning came slow and gray, the kind of morning where even the sun seemed uncertain. The rain had quieted to a misty drizzle, thin as breath, but the cold lingered, heavy in the bones. Maria stood outside the barn, her arms crossed tight around her chest, watching as steam rose from her damp clothes. Her breath came out in little clouds. She had stretched a piece of string between 2 splintered beams to hang what little they had. 3 shirts, a pair of socks, the corner of a blanket. Nothing was dry. Nothing ever fully dried out here. The barn smelled like rot and wet earth, but it had walls, and for now, that was enough. Inside, the children still slept. Curled like kittens, tangled in each other. Ava had kicked her foot free of the blanket and Maria gently tucked it back in before stepping out again. The gravel crackled. She turned her head sharply at the sound. A truck, old but well kept, slowly coming down the dirt path. Panic flared in her chest. She thought of grabbing the kids and running. But where? Back into the rain. The truck came to a stop a few feet from the barn. The engine idled, then clicked off. The man who stepped out wasn't young. Broad-shouldered, gray at the temples, work boots, flannel shirt. He moved with a kind of tired purpose, as if he wasn't there to frighten anyone but wasn't in the mood for hesitation, either. Maria straightened, wiped her hands on her jeans, bracing herself. He held up a hand like a peace flag. In the other, he carried a brown paper bag and a metal thermos. I'm not here to bother you, he said. His voice was low and kind, worn like denim. Name's James. I heard from the cashier at May's Market that there was a mother and some little ones out this way. Maria didn't answer. Her eyes narrowed. She took 1 step toward the barn door, instinctively putting herself between him and her kids. James stopped. I brought coffee. And biscuits. Still warm. No strings. We're fine, Maria said, voice rough from the cold and lack of sleep. We don't want any trouble. I believe you, he said, setting the bag and thermos down on a dry patch of ground. You look like someone who's done a lot to keep her kids safe. Just figured you might like something hot. There was a long silence. Then a small voice piped up from the barn. Is that for us? Joey stood in the doorway, hair sticking up, one hand rubbing his eye. James smiled. Sure is, bud. Maria turned to hush him, but something in James's tone stopped her. He wasn't looking at her like she was broken or pathetic. Just tired. Just trying. She stepped forward slowly, picked up the bag. Inside, 4 big biscuits wrapped in paper towels, and a small jar of jam. Joey edged closer. Can I have one, Mama? She nodded. Say thank you, mister. James tipped his head. You're welcome. Maria hesitated, then met his eyes. Why would you come all the way out here for us? James glanced up at the barn, then back at her. I've known what it's like to have a full house go quiet overnight, he said. Too quiet. He nodded toward the children. A little noise like that. That's life. That's worth the drive. He turned back toward his truck. You don't owe me anything. I'll leave you be. Maria stood in the mud, the warm biscuit heavy in her hand, and for the first time in 3 days, her knees didn't feel like they might give out. She didn't call after him. The sky still wore a heavy coat of clouds, but the air had softened. Damp earth gave off a thick, grassy smell, and the birds had begun to test their voices again, uncertain but hopeful. The world was no longer drenched, just dripping. James had returned that afternoon. He didn't say much, just showed up again, same truck, this time with a plastic tub full of groceries in the back. A loaf of bread, canned soup, instant oatmeal, a bag of apples, a box of diapers. Maria had said nothing when he said it beside the barn entrance. She didn't ask why, she didn't thank him, not yet. But when he offered to fix one of the broken planks on the wall to keep the wind out, she nodded once, quietly. Now it was near dusk, and Maria stood outside the barn with her arms folded, watching her kids splash in a wide puddle under the fading gray light. They wore borrowed jackets James had brought with him, leftovers from his grown kids, probably. A little big, but warm and dry. Ellie was laughing again, that high, clear sound Maria hadn't heard in weeks. Joey had made a boat from a stick in a torn juice box. Ava clapped from her perch on a folded blanket laid on a patch of grass. Maria felt her ribs loosen a little at the sight, as if she'd been holding her breath for far too long. James stood beside her, hands in his pockets, watching with quiet attention. They're good kids, he said after a while. Kind of amazing, the way they bounce back. Maria gave a small smile but said nothing. He glanced over at her. I know this ain't a place meant for living. Not like this. No, she murmured. It's not. But it's what we had. James nodded. You don't need to keep having it. Not alone. She looked up at him then. Eyes guarded, but something flickering there. Uncertainty, caution, hope. I've got a house out on Deerfield Road, he said, still watching the kids. 3 bedrooms. Heat works. Fridge is stocked. And the roof doesn't leak. Maria's arms tightened. I don't know what you're offering. I'm offering a place to rest, he said plainly. Not out of pity. Not because you owe me anything. Just because I've got more than I need, and you've got less than you deserve. She swallowed. Her throat felt thick. I've been on my own a long time, she said, almost like a warning. So have I, he replied. There was a silence. A real one. Not the kind filled with awkwardness, but the kind where 2 people stood on either side of a decision neither one wanted to rush. I don't want to be a burden, she said softly. He looked at her then. Fully. Kindly. You're not. You're someone who needs a place to land. And maybe I need something like that, too. The house on Deerfield Road wasn't fancy, but to Maria, it looked like something out of a forgotten dream. Real walls, a porch with chipped white paint, windows that glowed with golden light, and the faint smell of something cooking drifting out into the early evening. It had been 3 days since James helped them load into his truck, their meager belongings packed into a few grocery bags. 3 days of hot showers, clean sheets, warm meals, and the kind of quiet that didn't feel like loneliness but peace. The first night, Maria had tucked her children into real beds, each one with pillows and blankets that didn't smell like mildew. Ava had reached out for her in the dark, but Joey had fallen asleep mid-sentence. Ellie had whispered, "Is this for real?" And Maria had whispered back, "I think so." Now, on this 4th evening, the house felt less like a stranger's and more like a chance. From the kitchen, the sound of clinking dishes and soft music floated through the open window. Maria stood at the sink, her hands submerged in warm soapy water, washing up after dinner. Her hair was tied back. She was wearing one of the shirts James's late wife had left behind, loose-fitting, soft, floral. It had taken her 2 full days to work up the courage to accept it. Through the window, she could see the kids in the backyard. James had set up a tire swing that afternoon. Joey and Ellie took turns pushing each other, shrieking with laughter. Ava toddled through the grass, her arms flailing as she chased a butterfly. James sat on the back step, watching them, a cup of tea in his hand. He looked relaxed in a way Maria had never seen before, as if something had settled inside him, quietly, without fuss. She stepped outside with a towel in her hands, wiping them dry, and sat beside him. "It's not lost on me," she said, her voice gentle, "what you're doing." He didn't look at her right away. Just nodded, eyes still on the children. "It's not charity," he said. "You've given this house more life in 3 days than I've had in 3 years. I didn't think people like you were real," she said after a pause. "People who just help." He turned toward her then. "I didn't think I'd ever hear laughter in this backyard again. Thought I'd learn to live without it. Turns out I missed it more than I knew." A breeze passed through, lifting a curl of hair from her cheek. He reached up instinctively to tuck it behind her ear, then caught himself and pulled back. Maria smiled faintly. She looked out at her kids, who were now lying in the grass, pointing at the clouds. "They're starting to believe it's okay to be safe," she said quietly. "To let down their guard. So are you," James said. She blinked at that, surprised by how true it felt. They sat there together in silence for a moment, watching the sky turn to soft golden, pale blue. Then James said, without any drama or ceremony, "You don't have to sleep in the rain anymore, Maria. You're home now." She closed her eyes, the words sinking in, warm and slow like sunlight on skin.